Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Loser.
3, 2, 1. Welcome and welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. We are here to do Loki Season 2, Episode 4, Heart of the TVA. I think at this point, in terms of the WGA strike, the SAG-AFTRA strike, I think they're on their third day of negotiations, and I think the press tried to say if they don't do anything today, then nothing will happen till January, but I've heard otherwise. But yeah, I guess SAG-AFTRA gave a counter offer. Hopefully this results in the studios seeing that they need to pay people fairly and give them safe working environments and not try to, exploit every possible thing about this process.
Yes.
Well, let's get into it. This is the episode. Renslayer, Miss Minutes, they're kind of right where we left them last time, which is handy. No weird jumping in time yet.
I agree. I like that we don't have to waste a lot of time into cutting to the chase of what that secret is that we're lingering on the last episode.
So yeah, Miss Minutes shows Ravonna Renslayer, I think, in a very interesting way. Because of where they are. She gets to watch what happened in the audio that we heard in episode 1 when Loki was listening in, and learn that she is a bigger part of this than she initially thought. And
she's
she, as you were about to say, she led the army that won the multiversal war for He Who Remains, and really does look like she was actually like a partner with him.
Yeah, she was the whole damn thing.
Well, I mean, initially that the memory we see shows that she was a partner, and then yes, as you said, after she absorbs the fact that she had her mind wiped and was clearly never meant to be a partner, Miss Minutes is like, I mean, you did everything. He just kind of sat here and reaped the benefits. So I don't really think we needed him, and we definitely don't need him now.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
Yeah, it's good that they found their way to each other.
Yeah, enemy and my enemy. It's good. It's good times.
Then what do we see next? Yeah, we see
Timely
Victor
in the TVA.
enter. He gets into the TVA, and
he's marveling at everything. He's just like, look at what I've done. Look at what I've done in time. I don't know if he's marveling at it, taken away, or just like, oh crap, I have to do this now. I
think it's in phases, because I think you're right. He has all of those things happen, but I don't think it happens right away. I think initially, what, like as you said, he's marveling at everything, and I think once he starts getting overwhelmed by like B-15 meeting up with him, then Mobius and Loki, then Sylvie, which I'll get to in a bit. Like they're all there, and he's kind of like, wait, like everyone's coming after me. And then I think that's the second part of what you said, of realizing like I did all of this, so back off. Like let me get my bearings here, and I deserve a say in what's going on here, because you're obviously all indebted to me based on the fact that I did all of this.
Yeah, he's realized very, very quickly that power shift, and it's very fun to watch him stumble with it. Because it's such a weird character to begin with, and you're just like, oh, you're getting it now. And you're like, oh, this is the first time you think you have any kind of authority ever. And it's funny to watch it.
And I do think that my feelings about him kind of became more clear here. Like I think he has this moment where he's like, I don't have to trust any of you, and I'm from Chicago where no one trusts anyone. So like, all I know is I'm the only one that can fix this loom thing, which seems, what's the word for it? Conceited in the moment, but then you realize that like he's really about that life. Like we'll get to it, but the setup here is that like he says this maybe to gain power in the situation, but it's not something that he's hiding behind either. Like he really is like, no, it has to be me. I'm the one that can fix this. And I don't feel like the way Jonathan Majors is playing it is in like a foolhardy way. I think he really is like, this is my responsibility. I did this and it's my responsibility, as opposed to no, everybody shut up. I'm the only one who can. I think he is really like, look what I created, and I think it's my responsibility to actually deal with this.
I agree. It's him stepping, like it's like he said the previous episode. It's like I felt like I've been meant for something more or something like that, and it's him stepping into this role, but having obviously faking it because he doesn't know in any context of what he's dealing with right now, but he's just like faking it till he makes it, which I kind of love watching him do here, because he alludes to the fact that it's a shyster city that he lives in, or doesn't because of tax purposes. And he's being a shyster. It's so great to watch.
So yeah, I guess what I was alluding to is they didn't start the episode with me being confused, but they got to it with this whole Sylvie showing up, and I'm like, what? Like, up until they have the discussion about it, I was like, did I miss something where she was like, yeah, I'll meet you there later in the episode beforehand? But no, they just made a weird choice to have her be like, okay, I'll go with them, even though it made it pretty clear to me that she was like, you do your own thing, I'm doing my thing. And I understand that she can have a change of heart, but again, it feels like something we should see on screen, or like what actually made that decision, because the way last episode left it, I would understand if she didn't have a change of heart and kept going her own way.
Yeah, and I think I actually talked to that in the last episode we did, was just like, okay, now she's left with the position of having to hover and just basically make sure that they follow through with what they do. And I guess this is it. This is just her awkwardly being like, yeah, I'm anxiously making sure he doesn't turn into He Who Remains within a reasonable amount of time, whatever amount of time it takes for her to calm her anxiety. But
I don't think you're wrong to think that. I'm just saying what is written doesn't really lean to that.
I agree with that.
What is written and what is like acted out is more of a like, going back to season 1 of like, no, I just want to be around you because you're my person. And I don't mind that they feel connected. And she's like, oh, well, if Loki's doing this, I'm going to just go along with him on this. Is how it felt to me that it was being presented. I would rather it's what you said, but it didn't feel that way. So it felt very confusing to me as to what they were trying to get at. But you know what? She's here. And as I've always said, if you've got Sylvie and Renslayer driving the action, I'm all for it. And
yeah, if you've got something.
I feel like they're both in this quite a bit, and it works for me in that sense. And as I said when we first started covering this, I'm just going to enjoy spending time with the characters I like. I'm not going to get too caught up in that. But yeah, it was a bit distracting for the first bit of it, where I'm just like, why is she here? Like, this doesn't make any sense based on what we just saw. But
right, and to me, I'm
like, oh, you're like, I understand that a lot is not said in this episode. Usually, you have to actually read people's faces, and Loki plays it. Well, Tom Hiddleston plays it well when he sees her, and he's just like, okay, she's here. Well, we'll see how that goes. But it's just more like, but Mobius doesn't have anything to say about this when he sees her. Or anything. Like, anyway, that's that. And
that is something I do agree with. Is just Mobius is a bit too chummy, especially later on. Which we'll get to.
Say much. I think he has some good moments where you can read it on his face, but I think in these initial things, something would have been good about him being like, "Oh, you're here," and what? Why? Or again,
and trying to do what Mobius would be expected to do in this situation, which is why I feel like it speaks to how dysregulated and how severe the actual scenario is, which is kind of great too, for him to actually step outside of that I'm always in charge, let me get a hold of the situation kind of authoritarian TVA role that he's adapted, right? Which is what I would have I think most people would have expected, but the idea that he didn't is just like, oh, okay, he's actually here dealing with this scenario, but is at the same time disconnecting the moment he can. And it's interesting to see how Loki perceives it later on.
So then the next scene is Judge Gamble letting B-15 know that her words changed how she acts, which we talked about and I thought was a strong scene.
Yes.
And that she thinks that B-15 could have the same effect on Docs, which I didn't think was true, but seems like she is right about that. I mean, obviously she has to be right for the show to progress, but I was just I was just like, yeah, I think you're giving a lot of credit to B-15. I mean, a lot of credit to Docs, actually, I would say, if you think she would actually listen to B-15, but we'll get there. And they just setting up that B-15 can be persuasive in her own conviction. So that was nice to acknowledge that. Then I really liked this joke because obviously the word Ouroboros, so that name references a snake eating its own tail, and I felt like they were doing that in the first episode, as it was like he's having the conversation in the past which is informing the future, but he's in the future, he's like, oh wait, this is my, and so I like that they did it without calling attention to it in the first episode, but in this episode they just flat out, it's like he's like, oh yeah, I made the guidebook, but it was our handbook based on Victor Timely, and then everyone's like, this is Victor Timely.
This that guy.
it's like, oh wait, so your work is based on his work, which is based on your work. And he's like, yeah, like a snake eating its own tail. I'm like, there, they did it. They got there.
They said it.
they got it.
They served it up on a silver platter for everyone. It's like, don't bother to Google what the word Ouroboros means. I still can't say it.
Yeah. Ouroboros. But
yeah, Ouroboros,
It was great stuff. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Yeah, them broing out here was actually really legitimately a lot of fun to me. How they're just like you and the way you did, and I'm like, just you're stroking your own ego, and it's hilarious to see this scene. It's great. I love it.
Could be. I think, obviously, from my point of view, much like that conversation with that in the first episode where we're like, look, it's a black woman and a woman who is disabled who are able to understand and wrap their heads around why things need to change. I saw this as and to my point last episode, I don't think they were engaging in that, but to me it read as I think you're right, they're just broing out and bragging. But to me, I was also aware of the fact that you've got a Chinese person and a black person being able to congratulate each other on accomplishments that the white people in the room weren't able to achieve or conceive of.
Even
I don't think that's what they were going for. Don't get me wrong. Like I still stick to, this doesn't feel like a show that's interested in any of that. But it was interesting to see, so I didn't initially see it as them bragging like you did, even though I do think that is what's happening. I was just like, oh, that's nice of them that they can celebrate each other and have that bit of joy in a world where that wouldn't normally happen that way.
Because I played around with the same thought that you did, in the sense where it's like, are they speaking to this in the sense where that's what I mean. I agree with you. I'm like, it's something that I'm like, oh no, I'm projecting onto this. Is this something I wish they would be doing, but this is something they're just clearly broing out, and they just happen to be two people of color, which is great in its own right. But they're like you said, they're not interested in exploring that. I mean, it just happens to be the optics of it.
I just wanted to touch on that, but yes, you're right. It is just two characters broing out, and like it's supposed to feel like Tony Stark and Bruce Banner. Like it's not supposed to be a message in that sense, which is fine. As I said, I don't think that's what they're engaging in at any turn, but I do think that all of these things are interesting, like must be subconsciously happening at a certain level.
Yeah, and I'm glad you kind of brought up other kind of MCU comparisons, because there will be later ones that I bring on later on in this episode. I don't know if it's just a coincidence or anything like that, but it's interesting. But it, like Loki has done multiple times, and it does later on, he references the events of the MCU as you like very meta-ly with reflection.
Yes. So then after all of that happens, Ouroboros finally gets into explaining what the plan is, and I like that he gets some more praise because he's like, oh, it's not finished. I didn't have time to do this properly. I only have the one coat of paint. It's not to scale or whatever. And they're like, give yourself some credit. This looks great.
So and this is the scene where I'm like, I definitely know I'm projecting here, because I'm like, okay, this speaks to Asians not being able to take words of flattery as like any kind of thing, and need to be convinced in that scenario, and just more or less highlighting the fault in what they've done. Like, he just highlights the fact that it's not to scale multiple times. And I'm just like, okay, that's definitely been projecting, but I don't know who had a role in that, but I'm like, these are nice touches that they actually would have those elements.
I hope
some
of that is the actor.
Like, I hope so too.
He's an Oscar-winning actor. I don't think he's just there to like say the lines. I would imagine that he would bring some of that into it.
Yeah, especially, well, he brings a lot into like fight scenes and stuff like that too.
Well, I mean,
but in other kind of stuff.
Scenes in
no,
show,
not here.
What I'm saying is
in other stuff.
Yeah,
but like he does a lot of background support stuff, which is ironically what his character is, which is ironic because he shines so much in this scene. I'm like, he steals the scene as far as I'm concerned. I'm like, yeah, Victor Timely, you did your thing last episode, and it's tuned down here, but OB shines. It's awesome here. It's great.
I am glad you feel that way. I don't, but I'm glad you do.
That's fair. Yeah, that's why I was like, I'm
not
definitely
saying he's doing
projecting
anything wrong. I'm saying I don't think they're using him to his full potential. But I'm glad that you're enjoying
not yet.
What you get.
Not yet is what I think. If they plan to, but whatever.
I heard something from the House of Art podcast that was a bit of a bummer, which because everyone's been, trying to figure out what's the actual angle, because you wouldn't get this Oscar-winning actor to just be Ouroboros, which it seems like is the case. But one of the members, Joanna Robinson, who wrote a book and spoke to Kevin Feige recently and all this stuff, and has had interviews, was like, it was more just like Kevin Feige likes Ke Huy Quan and like really liked him in Everything Everywhere All at Once, but is well aware of everything he's done in the past, and was just like, I just want him in this show, and that's a cool role for him. It wasn't really like, ooh, how do we line up like everything he can do with this character? It was more just like, yeah, whatever, man, like put him in. I like this actor. And then he won the Oscar, and then it maybe maybe for later they can think about his depth as an actor, but I think they were just like, it's Data from Goonies and Short Round. Let's do this.
And I mean, a lot of this is us, and this is why I in that scene before, I'm like, oh, this is definitely him playing into that cultural role, is us projecting, is in that sense where like we did the exact same thing when William Jackson Harper was cast in Ant-Man. And we were like, oh, he's got to be more. And I'm like, no, he's literally just the guy that explains stuff here. He's the translator. There's no bigger role. And I think we have to accept that. Sometimes that.
Clear, I didn't do that.
No, right. Not we. I think I'm saying society. Society did. And I'm glad you made me clarify that. Because we as a podcast didn't. But it is gotten to the point where we are projecting as a society so much onto these castings and all that kind of stuff. We are often right when we're like, oh, you wouldn't get Catherine Hahn just to do that role. I'm like, yeah, she's getting her own series now, or downgraded to movie, whatever it might be. We don't know. But was Ke Huy Quan supposed to be something more? That's why I'm like, I just want to see. I don't think he's got any alternative role. And for the reason of his past career and how it's been mismanaged, he's got trust issues, obviously.
Yeah, so that's it. Basically he gives the plan, and then they are like, there's the fun stuff of who's in the suit in the plan. Sylvie says the right thing, which is he's wearing a helmet. It doesn't look like anyone, so and then I like I like Ouroboros' like he's usually pretty pleasant. I feel like this is him being stern of like, it doesn't matter who's in the suit, so let's just figure this out right now. I like that turn that he had of just like, yeah, joking around, like it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It's doable
right now. Like,
it's doable by anyone. Like,
well, I mean, there's that element, but then kind of off screen, you hear him while Victor's like looking around. You hear him say like, I mean, there is the other issue of the rings. I know they do a much better scientific explanation, but the rings aren't big enough. They still can't actually create something that can withhold the amount of power that they need. And that's where Victor comes in, and he's kind of like, I think I have something for you. Yeah. So then it comes down to, all right, Casey, Obi, and Victor are going to work on that. And then we get this interesting scene in the hallway where Mobius suggests, like, oh yeah, let's go get some pie while we wait for them. And she's like, you're going to wait for them? And I like what she says, which is like, you know, like you're waiting while timelines and people are dying. Like, you think that's cool? You think like, we should just take a break? And she calls out like basically everyone has at this point, like, you know, you're a variant and you still haven't checked in to see what that looks like, so you just think like everything's cool, like you should just relax. And I think this is where Owen Wilson does the great, like, it's all on his face, he doesn't have to really say anything. Stuff we already know what he thinks, but I like that here he doesn't have to restate it with words, like it's on his face. This is where I think he's doing the good, just like face acting. So yeah, she storms off because she's not really liking his laxed approach to this.
No, and in many ways I feel like she's projecting that, like, oh, we could be doing more is always the thought. But in this situation, Mobius is, because he's been corporate for so long and he's dealt with this scale, and like deleting timelines is just paperwork for him, that he's just like, Sophie doesn't understand where he's coming from, and that's what she hates about it, is the idea of like, that's literally just paperwork for you, that a timeline and billions of people are deleted and you're gonna eat pie. But realistically, he's delegated the task properly. He's just like, what can he possibly do in this situation? We need to fix the thing. It's not like going to a timeline is going to help anyone. Like, we start picking and choosing?
I think
he's disconnecting. He's dealing with it mentally, or not dealing with it mentally. And that's what Sophie's like, how she, I feel like she's projecting here. I feel like she really is.
I don't think so. I mean, she could be. I think that it's what she's getting at is my frustration with people in general, which is, you know, that idea of like, if Hillary had won, they'd all be going out to brunch, like thinking like, all right, we've done our part, like now let's go eat. Like, everything is an issue until you can be like, all right, it doesn't bother me anymore. And it's what I liked about Quantum Mania as well, of like, please stop looking away. You can't, just because you don't have a face to the people who are dying doesn't mean it's not an urgent matter right now. Like, you being part of the TVA means at this moment you do have the power to do something. And so, like, to the extent that like B-15 is trying to convince Docs to help them out, like, there is other things he could be doing other than eating pie. I think that's why the pie thing made something in it, why I connect it with they'd all go eat brunch if Hillary won or something like that, which is like, oh yeah, let's kick our feet up now, nothing to do. And so that's why I don't think she's projecting so much as being like, and again, I don't think it works really because we didn't see what decision making went into her following them. But like, she's like, I am here now. And again, it would have been cool if we actually saw them like browbeat her and make her come with them. And then she could be like, what are you doing here? Like, you forced me to come with you. And she says all of this, but it doesn't really make sense to me in the moment.
No,
like,
it doesn't make sense at all.
Like, you forced me to come here, and now you're gonna kick up and eat pie. Like, so none of that really makes sense. But I still think that in general, her idea as someone who has been the hunted and is, you can't just keep turning away. Like, there is more. You guys are the ultimate power. Like, that's what was established in season 1. Whether or not that's true is still up for debate, but it is what the show has established, is like, you know, all that shit Loki can do doesn't mean anything in the TVA. Like, Thanos' stones, and I know they're not actually his, but like, we all thought like, holy shit, Thanos, and then he's got the stones. That doesn't mean shit in the TVA. So and Loki actually says this is the ultimate power. So yeah, I think that's what the frustration is there. And while I think later on she's being more inward looking and kicking herself or stuff, I don't think it's right there in that moment.
So the reason why I say this is her projecting is because the scene before, Obi does something very, very and I don't know if this is the scene here, but he basically explains why everything's fucking up. And he even goes like, because someone looking directly at Sylvie be like, killed he who remains. So to me, this is her projecting.
But then she looks proud.
Yes, but she looks proud doesn't mean that is reflective of what's going on, because to me a lot of what she's doing right now is based on pure emotion of not knowing what to do, and that's why she followed. That's okay, where the only thing I can do right now if I'm not going to kill him is to monitor him and prove like whatever, and that's why everything she's doing right now makes sense to me, but it's not making sense from how the show is being written. And to me she's projecting here because she's now reckoning with the idea of like, oh, free will without any regulation whatsoever is actually a problem based on all the timelines and everything she's seeing.
Oh, I 100% disagree with
really
that. That is not what she's thinking.
She's not. I think she's that's what starting she's to.
No,
I think she.
One, that isn't where she should land, and two, I like. She wouldn't be thinking that if she's saying everything you say sounds like you're trying to play God. That's not the words of someone who's thinking, maybe you're right, like we should be regulating this free will.
Right.
This is the main disagreement we had last episode as well. I am still deeply entrenched in that argument, which is she really, her whole thing is set it and forget it. Give them free will and then let them do their thing.
Yes.
There is no like monitoring or anything. That's why I find everything she's doing confusing, and I still attributed that to how they make these shows and everything jumbled around. But I do think that it makes sense what you're saying based on what we're being to an extent what we're being shown, but I don't think that ultimately she's come down to we need to monitor this stuff. Her whole thing is like this, I don't want loss of life and I don't want people to be controlled. That's her whole thing. Like, the future isn't written. We're not going to be taking away people's ability to make their own choices. So what I agree with is that she feels a way about something, but we haven't got to where she actually puts a pin in exactly what that is.
Right.
But I think that 100% she's proud that she killed, that she set that loose. And I think she's not proud of specifically who she killed to do that, but I think she thinks that she doesn't feel bad that they have the issue of too many timelines, because she's like, that's what I wanted, like freedom of choice. But I do think that you're right that she is kicking herself for a decision she made, but I don't think it's I just don't think that it's like, oh man, I gave people too many choices.
It's not that she's reckoning, and that's what I have to clarify. It's just these identifying, and this is why I say she's along anxiously, because she doesn't know what to do next other than monitor the situation. And then she's even calling out later on in the scene that we're talking about, all roads lead to pie is what I call it, where her and Loki actually have that discussion. But I'm acknowledging right now that we're skipping the scene between Brad and Docs. That's pretty important.
Yeah, let's not skip that.
Yeah, but I do want to get to there, because I do feel like this is where Sophie is starting to real. So why do I keep saying Sophie? I even wrote Sophie for some reason. Sylvie. Sylvie is starting to realize that the natural tendency for her to anxiously have oversight over the situation is starting to make the idea of we can't just give it away, and it's starting to change her perspective. That's what I fundamentally feel like is happening in this scene. That's why I feel like she's projecting, because I feel like she's starting to get to the point where she's recognizing that there has to be something between the extreme of what she's given, which is extreme chaos, right? And it's a discussion that keeps going through this episode.
Yeah.
But we got to get to the Brad and Doc scene for sure. We'll get to we'll put a pin in this, but Brad and Doc's, this is a great scene where they're that doesn't really help us figure out what their actual relationship was.
Well,
That
as I
led
said,
to the head touch
I didn't
thing.
think they were gonna get there. I
Yeah,
said that in episode 2. I think the
I,
time to like figure that out had long passed once you realize, oh, he abandoned everything, and they even confirm it here.
yes,
I was still giving them an out of like maybe that was always part of their plan, and he was a distraction, and they
right,
shut that down in this episode too. Like
right,
he yeah, I was never looking to find an answer to what their connection is
yeah.
because
I'm
it was there's no way there was time to get into that based on episode 2 alone.
Well, I
But
am
yeah,
glad you are the smarter, which is oftentimes the case. The smarter of the both of us, and didn't invest any time into that because I was just like, oh, what if? And I'm like, nope, nope. That was just a
no,
weird scene to have the forehead touch.
he was way too far along in his development for
Yeah.
that to make sense to backtrack at all on
No,
that.
you're absolutely right.
But yeah, so as you said, it's X5. He's trying to rally the
Mm-hmm.
truth, and even to your point of like trying to, I was like, maybe he's just trying to get them to do a play or something. Like, because way the scene starts is he's like, "All right, everybody, like we're outnumbered," and I was like, he can't possibly still be trying to like fight this, right? Like he's not.
He's
But
looking
he
for a
is.
way
He's
out.
like, no, like we could do this. Like we could beat them. We can get out of here. And
Mhm.
I at least appreciated that his whole reason for doing this was to get back to his life. It's not like he was like, we can take over the TV and rule it again. He's just like, no, let's just get the fuck out of here and we'll
Yeah.
all go back to our lives.
He is such a predictable character because he's so selfish, and everything he's doing here is just trying to maximize his chances for survival, right? Because he shifts sides so
Yes.
regularly,
Yeah.
and that's all he's trying to do is like, hey, this if we rally everyone, because he's right, all these brains working together to try to think of a way to get
Based
out is
on
a
their
lot
training
easier.
and everything. He's like, we can
Absolutely.
figure this out. Like we
Yeah.
could do something here.
Yeah,
You're
But
right. He is ultimately selfish.
Mhm.
I at this point, I'm still like, I mean, he is asking them to do the right thing, which is don't give up. We could get back to our lives and leave this shit. But
yeah,
you're
serving
right.
his own
But
agenda,
you're
though.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I understand. There's
Yeah.
still nuance to this.
Yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
Yeah, but yeah. So he does that, and
I like the line
I-
here
yeah,
where he
like,
says, I earned my life. And I'm like, oh, this is where he's moving his own goalposts of like, based on what metric? You didn't do anything. It's like you earned based on what? You cash in the work you did at the TVA to be like, no, we're checking out now or something like that. I like how he moves the goalposts. It's really funny to be like,
I think it was a bit more complicated than that, if I'm being honest. I think
really?
I think this is a question of, I think Docs is looking at it the way you looked at it. And that's why I like her response. Everything on her face and the way she says no.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's just doing the very simple thing of, I earn my life because that's why should you have to justify just living your life?
Right. But
Like,
that's not earned anything. That's just like, no, I'm checking out of this. And he's trying to use the word earned in a self-serving way.
I would say that it works for you, but I think you look at these things a little bit too closed off, and I think it's more rewarding and fruitful to see the multitudes that people can contain. And I understand that, yes, he is a selfish character that ultimately is working towards his own ends. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have moments like this one that we are specifically talking about, where he is still trying to connect on a human level with someone. That doesn't mean that because he does that, he's ultimately good. He's done enough to show that ultimately he is going to make the wrong decision and forsake people. But I don't think that in this specific interaction, that is what's being discussed.
No, he's leveraging a real interaction in his favor in some capacity, right? But I do like you pointing out the fact that Docs was like, yeah, we see it the same way, and I haven't actually earned it, and I've done more than you. And it's just flat out, no, we haven't earned it. It was a great response of like, no, she's true to her, what she believes in, which is great, I think, and speaks to how the rest of the scene plays out.
Yeah. So that is what I would say. I don't think in this moment it's him being selfish. I think he has a very real thing that he is trying to reckon with, which is why do we have to even justify going back to our going back to our lives. And if you want to look at it, I think the way Docs was looking at it, which is, oh, you think you put in enough time to do this. And I think her no is a lot of Natasha as well, of like, there's way too much red in our ledger to like ever feel like we deserve that or earned it. But I still think that ultimately, and again, this all goes into my frustrations with the world, is that people are constantly being, and in this case it's a white man, but in general, people are being constantly put in these situations where they have to justify wanting to live their lives. And I look at what's going on in the Middle East. I look at when in 2020, when it was being made clear to most people about police brutality, there's always this trial that's being put on when people think, well, you're bad, so you know what, it doesn't matter what happened to him because he did drugs and that, like, and that is the frustration I think comes up in this episode a lot, which is stop trying to put people on trial to just live their lives.
Yeah, and I get where you're coming from, because this episode explores it very, very a lot, and for different motives, and it still asks that question at the end of the day: what is the result of everyone having that ultimate free will over everything, right? It's an interesting kind of discussion on screen, but yeah, he's definitely saying, no, I don't have to earn anything. Docs is saying, yes, I do have to earn something. It's just people having that moral and philosophical discussion of like, why do we have to have a agreement towards thing? And it's interesting. And that's why I think there's a lot of disconnect in regards to discussion, because people are just like, I don't have to explain myself anymore. But people are still being like, no, you have to explain yourself. I'm like, no, you pay me from 9 to 5. I don't have to explain myself of why I'm not replying to emails outside this time zone, and here's laws about it or something like that. And I'm speaking to something that's very, very superficial compared to the things that you brought up, but that's something that's
it's still examples
it's very
of
true.
What I was talking about, which is the idea that like you should earn your right to living your life. And I don't mean this in the sense like, if people are gonna go, oh, what about serial killers? I understand. I hope you understand listening to this. I don't mean like, yeah, man, like just leave him alone if he wants to kill a bunch of people. I just mean the very simple thing of what Sylvie was trying to do. Like, just let her have her job at McDonald's. Like, is more what I'm talking about. Like, let her go back to that, and him wanting to go back to being an actor. Like, it's what I liked about when you saw Loki take over in Thor Ragnarok, and why I'm kind of really bumping up against a lot of what he's saying in this. And even because I like what you said in an earlier episode about how he's come from colonial, like this colonizing family. So if he truly did have a change of heart, he shouldn't be saying a lot of the things he says in this episode and in general. And I like that before, when you saw him get power, it was really just like, yeah, when we're gonna have parties, we're gonna do plays, and like no one here is suffering. No one's like, oh my god, like we're under the, and it's like,
but that is the point of they do say, like Thor even says, while the other realms descend into chaos and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's
because
the idea,
he was living his life and not trying to
selfishly.
I disagree with that, but like I would say that the whole point that this show is working at, and I'm not saying that it's landing on one side or the other, is do you have the right to dictate how other people live their lives? If there was a thing where it was like, oh, they're asking for help and you're ignoring it, which I don't think they fully established in Ragnarok, just because they did that before doesn't mean that's how it should be going. But that's why I disagree with what you're saying. But yeah.
But I see the idea here is, speaking to Renslayer and Sylvie's characters being at the extreme, what are the consequences of both extremes? And I like what Loki says here in the all roads lead to pie scene, which is conveniently the next one, where he basically says hope is hard, trying to find a balance is hard, trying to make something work is hard, it's easy to abandon something, which is, it's a great speech. But it's actually addressing the criticism I had of last episode of him trying to find that middle ground. And this is actually where I'm like, oh, okay, they actually did explain it decently well from where he's coming from, his motivations and all that kind of stuff, and why he can't simply abandon it. Because when he did, and I love the fact that you brought that up, because I was going to bring it up too. It's like when he just abandoned and lived his life according to how he wanted to, we have to acknowledge that it was selfish. We have to acknowledge the fact that it was deceitful. He was deceitful. He killed. He got rid of Odin. He is getting all these resources just for his pride and all this kind of stuff, his own ego, while the other realms don't get anything else. So he's accumulating all the masses for his own like whatever, his own hedonism. And I'm like, great, yeah, he doesn't rule with authority, he doesn't do whatever, but he doesn't support anyone either. And that's where I'm like, the lack of rule, the lack of oversight is where he's reckoning now, where he's like, no, there has to be something. I've done that extreme, and there has to be something in between, telling people, no, you can't just do anything you want, and it's harder. And I like that discussion here in the pie scene that they have. That's what I think the show's a little bit more about, but I can see where you're coming from too, and I think this is where a fundamental disagreement on us, but where we're coming from, I think it's fine.
I think that obviously you're supposed to agree with Loki here. What I think is wrong with how this speech is delivered and written, and this again comes from who's writing it, is it is conflating getting rid of the TVA, who for me stand in as the police, with burning everything to the ground. I understand that in the very immediate future, yes, they have to protect it so that everything doesn't blow up, but the idea that you would still work with that is what I think is wrong. Is like, and you've kind of touched on as well, that overreaching of trying to dictate how other people are living their lives, and that you think you know how to properly organize that. I think that's wrong. I think that it, especially if you're looking at the TVA, like the police, their whole thing was started to capture runaway slaves. It is only about protecting property, right? And that's in the show what the TVA is. So to that extent, you can afford to let that go, and you could think of something else, but I don't think that speech fully got there in terms of acknowledging that you shouldn't be conflating getting rid of the TVA after you save the stuff with getting rid of everything. And I think because he does that, it reminds me of the people that are like, well, no, like, you can't just get rid of the police. What's going to happen then? It is the lack of vision for anything other than what you already know.
Absolutely. And when people are coming at it from the perspective of what are we going to do with, what they're really saying is, I can't lose my personal bodyguard, like my safety, my ability to walk around entitled as fuck and do whatever the fuck I want and all this kind of stuff, which is where it's like, where I like where Loki lands in this scene. It's less, okay, well, it's up to us to do it better than he who remains. And it's that reminder of, okay, that old head, the changing of the guard, it is actually our position now to be like, what is the change that we need to do? It's not perfect, and it is the only thing that's existing from right now, from in this show, from now to actual literal chaos within the end of the episode and all that kind of stuff, which is like what works. And in this scene, what works is what Loki lands on and what he reminds everyone of. And this is why it works only in this scene, and why this discussion can only work here, is he just goes, yeah, we are gods, we're above them and all that kind of stuff. And that's what he's embraced in the previous episode, is like, yeah, we're doing mischief stuff now and all this kind of stuff. We're using the bad for the good and all this, and we are gods. We have to move on. We have to make these decisions. We can't debate all day. And I could see elements of where it's making a lot more sense to me from where Loki's coming from. I still think it's a lot of deep discussions on all these kind of things, but in this scene in general, I agree with you on all the other stuff. If we just abandon it, it won't go to chaos. We still have some sort of thing to fall back on, but the fundamental blueprint of what we have is based on crap. I agree. And I like what Loki says. Now that we have control of it, how do we change it? And I like how he's emphasizing the we, because he who remains emphasized the me. of how do I do this in my vision, right? So he's emphasizing the idea of how do we do this by committee? How do we do this with other people's voices? How do we do this all the like it's never been done that way. And that's the ultimate challenge is power's never been distributed. How does that actually look? And I like the discussion that happens, but like this, where Loki lands is we are gods, and it gets to move the scene on because I feel like that debate would just keep going over and over and over again.
As it should, but yeah,
you're right, as it should.
But so we skipped over a lot. What I was alluding to earlier when I was talking about Sylvie, we can just skip where B-15 goes to talk to Docs. But the beginning of that scene is in the pie room again, Loki doing what he did for Mobius, which is using something from the movies to empathize and like relate to, as well as like, yeah, just to do that stuff, which was, you think you're weak and that's a problem for not killing Victor. But, you know, I always looked at Thor for being weak, but obviously that's how you should be. Like, you should be looking at this in a more human way, which is why the "we are God" thing doesn't really work for me in the scene. But he is trying to be like, look, you can't just look at it like this. Might isn't right. Like, you did the right thing. You connected with him on a human level, and I think that's where she's feeling lacking, which was good to see that she was like, and maybe it was there for He Who Remains, and I didn't look hard enough. She's like, I didn't kill Victor because he was scared, and maybe He Who Remains was too, but I wasn't looking for it. And I think that's the interesting layer they've added here, which is he told her what he was going to do. He was like, this is it. Like, I don't really, there's no convincing me otherwise. But she still cares about life to the extent of like, but like, could I have looked harder? And I'm not saying she should have. That's not the point of bringing this up. It makes her a more interesting character, that she's like, I did the right thing, but that doesn't sit well with me anyway. And I did the right thing with Victor. And so could I have tried? Like, she already has an example of, I believe, well, there's no other way of looking at it. Like, Victor was the right choice to keep him alive. Like, he proved that at the end of the episode and everything. But like, yeah, so she has an example of like, look what happened when I actually dealt with him like on a human level, instead of being like, I know what is right. And could I have done that there? I think that's an interesting little thing that makes her doubt herself, even though we know as the audience, yeah, you did the right thing. But like, it's like, yeah, I just like that she's a bit conflicted on that. And I think that's where she can start projecting and stuff. But I don't think that fully lent itself to, we shouldn't be giving people free will. I think that was just like, am I doing this the right way? Because maybe I could have. And it's just that maybe I could have feeling that I think is going to be interesting to see how she works that into future interactions with variants.
It's definitely interesting because it's I say this is why she's reckoning with the consequences of her decision and all that kind of stuff. Can free will truly exist? Because if she wanted free will, she would have had Victor Timely dead. You know, but he's got a right to free will. So where does her free will end and where does his begin and all this kind of stuff, right? This is definitely his.
If you think the only thing she wants is for variants to be dead.
Yes, but if absolutely.
If she wants free will, then yeah, that didn't encroach on her free will. That was her being like, okay, I have new information.
To free will, which she did say, like, if I ever encounter a variant again, I will kill him. So this is her pushing back on what she wants and doing what she needs, which is following through with
the wording is important there, and that wasn't the wording that was used.
Fair enough.
The wording was, what if his people come again? She was able to see he isn't one of those. So again, I don't think that's her free will being encroached.
I think I do think she's getting that challenge to like, okay, what is your definition of like not bad yet and all this kind of stuff. She's getting, okay, if you institutionalize that, that's a problem too. I think she's getting that crack and like, actually dealing with her problems, or starting to reckon with it in this episode. And that's what I think is really great acting on her part. She's getting a lot of chance to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Are we at the Renslayer recruitment scene? The brutal and claustrophobic one.
So yeah, basically X5 is like, I don't care what B15 says. We can't work with her. Mm-hmm. She's no good for us. And Renslayer shows up with Miss Minutes. Obviously, Miss Minutes has a great "I know I'm working on myself" thing. When Dox is like, "I'm pretty disappointed in you."
I love that so much. I love that so much.
Well,
it's great
last episode too, but
it's so much on a meta level, speaking to the people that just do absolute shit things. It's like, yeah, I'm in therapy. I'm like, but you're not doing anything that's different. Being in therapy doesn't give you a card to get out of shit. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm being a big old baddie. I'm working on myself. I've got a few self-help books.
Yeah, I think
I love that meta joke. It's great.
I mean, obviously it's animated, but I thought they did some great work with her face on this.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically, as we alluded to, X5 switches sides to Renslayer because she's like, I'll put you on the timeline if you just help me get through this portion. Mm-hmm. And I like Dox being like X5 and then acquiescing and be like, Bradley, like I'll talk to you again, meeting people at a human level instead of
the roles.
That whole I know what's best and here's how we do it. Being like, all right, you want to be called Bradley, don't do this. And doesn't work out, so they all get killed. And I like that she says to X5 like, and I don't think this is a genuine question. It is supposed to be a dig at him. It's like,
100%.
Was life on the timeline really that good? And then she says to Renslayer, like, how does it feel knowing that we would all rather die than go out that door with you? Which I do think got to Renslayer.
Oh yeah, it did.
Some great parting shots for Doc that she goes out in a very confusing casting choice. Didn't really live up to the hype of having this woman. I think her name's Katie Dickey or something like that. Like, just great actor, and she kills it in this episode for sure. I don't know if she was great in any other episode, but she kills it in this episode. Which is, I guess, what they cast her for this episode. I was just like, I'm glad you got your shots in there. And she said, yeah, I am seeing the bigger picture, and working with you does not work for me. So just kill me. I'd rather be dead.
Yep. I appreciate that conviction and how she was able to be like, hey, I convinced the rest of my army to suffer the same fate. And Bradley, excellent. And I like that you point out how they use his title and his name interchangeably for persuasive reasons, to either appeal to his humanity, and then later on Renslayer was like, hey, I'm only going to call you X5 now. Which is great.
I would say the wording isn't interchangeably. The wording is they use it specifically.
Interchangeably in regards to referring to the person, but specifically in the sense where
means it's the same thing. Whereas we are both saying it doesn't mean the same thing if you call him X5 or Brad.
Okay, fair enough. Absolutely. But I like how you pointed out the fact that they're using his name, and his title, and a different level of communication.
Yes. Yeah. It is strategically being used as opposed to interchangeably, and they're, as you pointed out, there obviously was a closeness there with him and Dox because she eventually calls him Bradley, and there's nothing there with Renslayer, who continues to call him X5, even though she knows what he wants to do. She knows who he is. She's like, yeah, X5, fuck you.
Yeah, and this is like a great bit of acting on his part. Obviously, they're not going to show us them all being squished. But his visual acting and all that kind of stuff is just the idea that, oh, this was what I was tortured with. This was the fate that I could get, and this is what I'm seeing them. And like, and the fact that she's like, is this what it's worth? And the idea of like, yeah, you're not going to get what you wanted back, like ever. You're changed forever. Like you're going to be Renslayer's lackey like forever now. And so one of the comparisons I liked here, better than the Carl Urban Hela kind of thing in Thor Ragnarok. definitely, I feel. But as a comparison to another Marvel property and within the Thor franchise too, I thought was kind of meta in the fact that they did this and improved upon that Carl Urban thing, uh, and really showed the acting skills here off because this face was doing some good stuff.
But yeah, and then they hit it again with B-15 when she goes in the room. But yeah, this did some good stuff. We go back to Victor, Ouroboros, and Casey, and they complete it. Whatever they were working on. Again, I was not interested in any of the scientific stuff, but they fixed
the MacGuffin.
It needs to go into the loom. They fixed it. Whatever is being shot off into the loom.
Yeah.
And then this truly is baffling stuff here. I did not understand what they were going for with this, which is Victor being distracted by a hot chocolate machine and being like, I have to go see this. And the show shuts down every idea I have like immediately because I'm like, okay, so this is where he turns bad and everyone is like let down by the choice they made. But it's like it seems like he legitimately just wanted to try the hot chocolate.
Yeah.
And like I'm thinking, oh, he's gonna do something fucked up to D90. It looks like he's doing something like the way he snaps at him, like, did he hypnotize him? What is going on here? Then D90 dies and he looks genuinely scared. I'm like, so he isn't running a scam here. I'm not quite sure why we're like, I get that he needs to be abducted, but I just was like, everything about this feels so forced to get him abducted as opposed to it happening a little bit more naturally that I was like, why are we seeing this in particular?
I think it's a nice little reminder that he was just putting on that mask of like, hey, I'm the one with the power right now. I'm like, no, you fell back into your, we got you to do your sciencey thing. You liked it and you let your guard down and you were able to be a child and innocent like and all that kind of stuff. I really agree with you. It's confusing what they're trying to do here. I'm like, it's a lot of setup for like, wait, what's going on? And I'm like, oh, I thought there was something malicious going on there. I'm like, you drugged this, but how does this drug thing? Did you have pill size? Like,
all of that. And then I thought they were gonna be like, oh, now that Mobius and the team sees this, they're gonna be like, oh, like he screwed at us. But that they don't even
see.
They don't even go down that either. Like,
exactly.
It's just like, oh, they see it, they're like, oh yeah, it must be Renslayer, and you're like, I'm glad you're smart enough to realize that, but like, why did any of this happen the way it happened? Like,
yeah, it's just weird. Like, I feel like for an episode that is stressing that you didn't have enough time, having this minor little thing, and maybe this is to Sylvie's point. It's like, oh, we're really going to consider this in this point in time, and see what downfall it leads to. Yeah, if we're selfish, I guess maybe.
Yeah. So yeah, D90 got pruned. I guess I should have seen that. Said that,
and it's X5 being like, X5 I'm sorry. I'm like, that's the last time you'll say that, buddy, because your humanity's dead.
And then what do we see? Yeah, this is where Casey and Ouroboros are kind of like, oh, we're before that. There's hints of like, hey, pass me your time pad. I think but it's like this is confirmation. Oh, Miss Minutes is locking us out of the system.
I like the Jurassic Park little Easter egg there.
Yeah, I love the Jurassic Park stuff.
It's great. It's great. You didn't use the magic word.
Yeah.
Great stuff, Newman.
So then we see Renslayer being like, I'm not going to fall for any of your tricks. You're an idiot. Just listen. Like, we're going to get what we want out of it. But he is still managed to stall for time throughout that.
Oh my!
I was like, good
God,
for you, Victor.
What a slimer! What a shyster! This guy's got slime written all over it. The moment he saw the both of them, I love that look. It's like, oh, I'm so glad. And I'm like, cut the shit. Just cut it. I'm like, yes, go Renslayer. Cut the shit. It's great stuff. So slimy.
So yeah, that's happening while the events of episode 1 start happening again. Like you start seeing episode 1 Loki, episode 1 of season 2. That is Loki running around, and I think you even said it on the first episode. Like, it was obviously Loki who pruned himself.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that, but I think I did remember saying we're going to come back to the scene. It's very, very important. And I'm like, now that it's here, that I'm like, okay, it's great that it closed the loop. And I'll get to this, but when we get to the end, but it's a little unsettling.
Agreed. Yeah. And then we learn Ouroboros is the one that called on the phone to be like, "What the hell's taking you so long?" And
did you feel down by that, or did you feel like that
once
great.
It was said that Loki, once it was like clear Loki pruned himself, I was like, I don't care about anything else. I unfortunately just was like, I'm not like this wasn't an intriguing part for me. I was just like, okay, but, great.
See, the funny thing is, if you consider who Ouroboros is, I'm like, yeah, that's still big. That's still significant.
That he called.
Yeah, it's just him. I'm like, it's still significant, but it's
why?
Yeah, it was because it's OB, the great one. But it's okay. Just like the idea of like, yeah, that's a mislead. It was like, oh yeah, we'll throw you off a little bit. I'm like, great, you're right to be like, we're building that up into a lot of nothing.
I don't like, nothing about it felt like a mislead. I was just like, okay, like now we know what happened. I nothing. As I said, nothing intrigued me about it, so I wasn't like, "Oh my goodness, when are they going to get back?" I kind of forgot about it until it was happening. I was like, "Oh right, this." So yeah,
I was surprised that they're like, "Oh," when they did it, I'm like, I knew it was coming. I'm like, "Oh, they're doing it here," and that's why I'm like, it's unsettling that it's happening so early.
No,
but it's also exciting.
As you said, it makes sense at the end of the episode why it happened here. But
yes,
yeah, I was just like, okay, great, this will be done with, and then
we've closed the loop, people.
But what I found unsettling was just the way that there was, even though Ouroboros is calling to be like, what's taking you so long, he's also like, I don't know, I guess I could reboot the system, and it's like, do it. What do you like? What's happening here? Like, Loki and Sylvie have the right reaction of yelling at the phone, and I'm just like, yeah, like I know he says what the issue is, but it's like, what does it matter? You could die from the blast, or you could die from someone doing magic to you, maybe. Like, fix the blast. Like,
yeah, I think what this is showing is that Obi's character doesn't move anything forward on his own accord. It's just like he needs that instruction, right? To what do I do next? Like last episode, it's like, do I take care of the loom or do I take care of this? And he just needs that direction. He's kind of like an AI.
We have a different reading on that. That really? Is me seeing him as knowing exactly what's going to happen.
That's me being like, no, in that scene, he's definitely, and I don't know if the sarcasm's the right word, but he's just like, whatever. But I feel like his character is more. He's trying
to be nice about being like, hey, there's bigger things to do,
bigger fish to fry for sure. But I do feel like he needs more input from other characters to move things along than
I think things. It's more just he's moving at his own pace, and it'll get done. It's just. It was just weird how slowly that was all being teased out, when I'm just like, you guys have made stupider split-second decisions. Just do this already.
Yeah.
So he does, and I thought they did a great job with Miss Minutes glitching out.
Because that was awesome.
Well, the first thing I liked is she starts stuttering, and Victor takes that as a slight to him because he has a stutter. I think he speaks very, like, I don't want to say specifically, and he speaks with intent so that you don't catch on fully to the stutter he has, but it's there. And I like that he says, well, mockery isn't like, that's not the choice, like, which is so I like that moment. He's like, hey, stop mocking me.
Because that's how they actually the therapy techniques that they use with stutters is that they get them to slow down, and that's why I'm like, okay, the previous scene, him doing that on stage, I'm like, oh, okay, that's you managing your anxiety too, which is great.
Coco, like he stutters on that as well, but yes, the stage thing is a lot of, you see him being very intentional of how he's going to pronounce everything, and slowing it down, as you said.
He has memorized a script, and he is not going off of it, and he's definitely using those techniques. It's kind of cool. I mean, obviously they're not going to be like, this is a therapy technique that they use for stutterers and speech language pathology, but it's what they do, and so cool stuff. I guess
I like that, but then I just liked everything about her glitching out, and then you get to see her as like the first clock. And I know earlier in the episode she says, hey, want to play chess, which calls back to her being like, I was just here to play chess with you. But yeah, her final full thought is, you're never gonna be him. Which
I love how petty this character is.
I'm glad that she got that up, but I was also like, I mean, he's already I feel past that at this point, like thinking he's gonna be that, like, but it still was like, I think helps confirm if anyone had any doubts, like, yeah, this guy isn't one of the variants they needed to worry about.
Yeah. Hey, one last word. Fuck you.
Yeah,
that was great. I loved it.
Then they Sylvie enchants X5. So it's a good thing they rebooted the system and let people do magic, which again should have been done earlier. But I
agree.
They do it, and he prunes Renslayer, but I'm like, did you really not think like something was it? Like, he's demonstrably acting differently. Like, he's, I don't know. It just felt like
Renslayer seemed very dumb in that scene. Yeah,
like, this is so clearly not real, right?
It's like, oh my god, this Trojan horse is just in my office right now. What is happening? Yeah, she seems dumb in that scene for a general that leads an army to win a war. I'm like, this is,
and everything she's done since we've seen her without getting her mind wiped. Like, everything she's done has been
kind of mid.
Well, this ending, you mean, for her?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not convinced it's an ending.
I would agree with you. It's not the end, but it got her out of the episode.
Correct. It convinces us to be like, okay, now we don't have another thing that we're competing against. It's just the loom breakdown. Cool.
Yeah. So then
it came to be a little bit of a shock that it actually happened. I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting that in this episode. It's kind of neat.
I guess for me, I'm like, I already know people can come back from this since they did it in season 1. So anytime someone gets pruned, I'm like, okay,
so it's like we'll find someone from another one of a billion timelines.
Like, there's no stakes. I don't like when people say no one can die, so there's no way there could be stakes. That's not what I mean. It was just more like, yeah, we'll see her later. I'm assuming, like,
yeah, because the moment they were like, okay, we could use the Victor Timely aura from this person and not he who actually remains, and whether or not this person grows up to be who remains or whatever it is to close that loop is just one of those things where it's like, yeah. This is we're closing the loops here. We're making sure she's not going for it.
He opens the blast door, Victor Timely, with his aura, and then he's like, yeah, it needs to be me that goes out there. And I think what convinced me that he wasn't trying to be conceited about it or self-important was that he was like, literally something could go wrong out there, and I will know how to fix it. Like, obviously we know Loki and Mobius won't be able to fix it. And Sylvie definitely has made it clear, like, no, you guys do this. This is your part. So it's like, yeah, he understands his responsibility in this situation.
Yes. And it's very smart because it's just like, no, well, you do have the brain equivalent here with Obi. So yeah, I can react a little bit more immediately there. So it's right call on his part, but you know what? This move did shock me. Because I was like, the spaghettification, I was like, I thought he was wearing plot armor, and that's why he did it. I legit thought he was going to pull it off and, get it done, and he was wearing the plot armor. And I'm like, wow.
I think this only really works. Their whole plan with Kang is if you have a bunch of variants, and so you kind of have to clear some off the board. Once it's made clear, like, oh, this guy's a good guy, then he's not really. You already have Ouroboros, as you said, so you don't really need another person that knows that. I hate to say that, given the optics of like, well, we already have one minority, we don't need the other one. But I do mean,
I know that's not what you're saying.
Yeah, in the storytelling of it, it's like, yeah, if he's not going to be a Kang variant that like can do something none of the other good guys can do, then
he just ends up doing
unfortunately
what Casey does.
Very expendable, and he serves its purpose at this point.
Yeah, I legit thought that Casey was going to be the one that was going to, go out there based on the previous scene where he moves it down there. And I'm like, are they setting out to be like, oh, screw you guys are taking too long. I'm just going to go do it myself. I know what to do. All this kind of, I legit thought that that's what was happening.
I mean, and maybe we'll go back in time and he will be the one that has to do it.
Maybe
he does have to take it across the finish line.
Yeah, because I'm like, if there was any character that was expendable in that scene to me, I'm like, oh, it's probably Casey.
I think I was looking at it as like, we need as many like versions, and I don't mean in this show, in this season, but we need as many versions of Kang as we can get. So like,
to help us think.
like I think it's time for him to be taken off the board.
Correct.
I didn't think he would die right away, but I didn't think he was making out of it. Once he was like, "Oh, I'm the one in the suit," and the whole episode is like, it seems like things are much closer than like. I know Mobius says it at one point later in the episode of like, it sounds like a sound you'd want to hear further away. I was like, yeah, no, anyone who goes out there isn't making it back. Like, you're dying if you go out there.
I like how he pointed it out that he's like, there's increased radiation than before. And I'm just like, he's pointing out the very real thing of, that. But I was surprised. I was legit surprised.
That is good. It means you're invested in the
Absolutely.
scene. Yeah, I think that's always good. I don't ever go like, "Oh, you got surprised." Like, I think good. I'm glad that
you got.
Yeah, like that is what the people who made this would want to have happen, and that means that you're actually engaged. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, it's very much like it's got the whole like, did we just lose? Kind of vibes of like that.
Well,
that
definitely. I thought you were going to bring up Infinity War, the way Loki has like what I felt like was like a Captain America moment of when he goes, "Don't know," and like when Captain America said, "Oh God," at the end of Infinity War, when it was like, "Oh no, we did lose." Shit, and
I think that is what I'm bringing up. Is like it's reminiscent of that scenes but the Star-Lord says like, did we just lose to like on what is it, Titan? And all that kind of stuff before they get to there. But yeah, it's got that nice vibe there. And the kill count in this episode certainly matches that of Infinity War too. So I'm like, oh, everything's a copy of a copy now. This is interesting. We'll see who comes back next episode because we got 2 more. But
yeah, I don't really know where they go from here, but I can see why everyone got the first 4 episodes that not us, but people who are in good got the first 4 episodes, because this would be a good place to leave it. So they'd be like, well, I gotta watch 5 and 6 now.
It's a good hype thing to, because and this is why I'm like, this is a great episode because it closes all the loops, and that's why it felt so unsettling to me. I'm like, wait, we're doing it now? I thought we would have done this last episode. And I'm like, truly, this is a point where I'm like, where do we go from here? They closed all the loops that I was thinking about and all that kind of stuff, and what happens with the pure result of chaos with Sophie's decision. It's very interesting. I can't wait.
We'll see next episode.
Yeah, because they do some great facial acting here in regards to the blow up and all that kind of stuff. X5, B52, Mobius 15. Doing his 15.
You got to put respect on that name.
B15. Sorry, I'm thinking of the shot. I don't know. Yeah, B52. Yeah, B15. Sorry, names hard for me. But yeah, good. This is a great scene of everyone just having that like, oh crap, we done fucked up. Good stuff.
Well, thank you very much for listening, everybody. We're part of the That Shelf Podcast Network with other great shows like Bad Game Movies, Contra Zoom Pod, Springfield Googleplex, and more. So please go to thatshelf.com. You'll find those shows, our show, and more shows. If you want to hear older episodes, you can go to our site, tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten, or get it on all the podcast platforms that you use. Rate, review, share, subscribe, follow, anything. And, get in touch with us. We are at TDF Spoiled on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram. And our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. So please get in touch with us. Let us know what you're thinking of the season. And we'll be back for episode 5. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.